everybody. Welcome to Church History for Chumps. My name is John Simon.
And I'm Thomas Duell.
And we're back, baby.
Yeah, dude, is this episode 1 of Season Trace?
I think so. Yeah. It's episode 1, dude. A lot of people said we'd never make it this far.
Yep.
My first grade teacher, she was like, "You'll never have a successful podcast."
She's in prison.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. That's where she said I would be.
Yep.
But look who's in prison now.
Look how the turntables.
Yeah, tax fraud, probably. Actually, my first grade teacher was great, which I feel bad about. I don't think she's listening. I don't know if she's still around.
I made up the prison bit.
I know. But Mrs. Roberts, if you're still there, I hope you're doing okay.
If you're still there.
If you're still listening. Yeah, who was your first grade teacher was your parents, right?
Yeah, I did have a 4th grade teacher that wasn't my parents.
Was it like your aunt?
No. Her name was Susan Walker, and she was a gem.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
All 4'4" of her.
Aw.
She's a little lady.
She in prison?
Not that I know of, but if she was, she could get out. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah, she's
perfect
whoop.
for the ducks.
She slipped through the bars.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, hey everybody, it's been a while. This might have been the longest break we've taken since we started a while ago, but it feels nice. It feels good. And I also noticed there might be like a gentle hum that you're hearing in the background, and if you are, it's called air conditioning, and it's because we're in the Southwest and it's 165 today. Mm-hmm. So we could have turned it off, but the last time we did that, our computers melted and we lost the first episode we did of Julian of Norwich.
Ooh,
and
I forgot about that.
I remember. Dark day, bro. Hot day, more like. So yeah, we're starting a new series. Last season was Hefty Heresies, and this one is The Early Church Gets the Worm. So really excited about that. It's basically going to be a bunch of kind of non sequitur topics of like the first few centuries. Just popping around. Yeah, that's how we do it. But you're kicking us off today, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a while since we've chatted with Chumps. Are we quick life update, or do we save that for Chumpcast for Chump Talk?
No, let's do it now.
Okay. Yeah.
Quick
so
life update.
You're in the middle of sabbatical, right?
I'm actually. Oh, jeez, I've got like 2 weeks left. Man.
All right.
It's slipping through my fingers, but it's been good, man. It's been a very restful kind of time, and like we've been talking about, there's certain ways you don't really realize how hard you've been working yourself to the bone until you take a step away from it and kind of get that bird's eye view angle. So I'm grateful. It's been a beautiful time. I've had a lot of wonderful time with my wife, which is always a blessing. So
sweet Annie.
Yeah, she's great.
You guys traveled internationally?
Yep, went to Mexico City, got the worst poops of my life. Oh, man. Yeah, they call it the curse of Montezuma. Have you heard that before?
Oh, really?
No, it's a real thing.
That just sounded like a John joke.
No, it's real. If you Google curse of Montezuma, it's like the nickname for travelers who go to Mexico and drink the water and get the bubble guts, bro.
Man.
So I got it viciously. It was the worst I've ever had.
Darn you, Montezuma.
Yeah, dude. He's still collecting bodies 500 years later. What about you, man? How's your summer been?
It's been good.
Yeah,
I've been here. I got a nice getaway from the heat. From where we live in Tucson, I made my way to Phoenix, and
breezy Phoenix. Yeah.
We did a little bit of a staycation there, but I mean, we've just been. I want to say we've had a busy summer, but it feels like we've just had like a steady summer. I've been getting a lot of time with family.
Nice.
Getting outside, hanging out, doing my work. So yeah, it's been good.
Good, man.
I've consistently. This might sound weird to anybody other than a bivocational pastor, but I've been consistently taking a day off every week.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
So that's. Honestly, I've been really happy about that. Just getting some time with the family and getting excited about some reading projects for some future series on church history for chumps.
Heck yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Should we just reveal what
Any
our next
spoilers?
series?
We might as well. Have we even talked about this?
I think we're
We've
going to do
talked
the
about it.
Crusades eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
That's probably, I would say by the end of this year, we'll be recording Crusades content.
Oh man, bless the Lord, dude.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
You know why I'm really excited? Because we're gonna fight.
Taking the Crusade to the podcast studio.
Right, yeah. Oh man, no, I don't think. Oh, we might. Oh, who cares? We'll see what
I'm
happens.
gonna have you in the Middle East, suiting up like a paragon for the Christian religion by the end of 2025.
All right, I don't think so. I'm gonna beat the Deus Volt right out of you, bro.
It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be really good. But hey, we're in early church mode because that's what people consistently wanted whenever we pulled our Instagram. Also, for people who have faithfully followed our Instagram, it's been real sleepy lately. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to sabbatical, but also, Instagram's hard, and I'm tired of making memes. Sometimes I just
We're
want a
gonna
little
come
break.
back with the force.
We're gonna come back though, for sure. In fact, we probably came back, but by the time you're listening to this, because we'll have probably a couple weeks between now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So hey, what's our first story? What's our intro to the early church?
Yeah, this one's gonna be a fun one. Also, kind of maybe a little bit of a hard one, but we're talking about some of the very earliest martyrs, Sergius and Bacchus.
Okay.
It's kind of taking me back to our early church history for Chump days, when we were talking early church, we were talking martyrs, we were hitting up,
We were just babies back then, man.
I know.
You had just graduated.
Yeah, and this is going to be a good one. So Sergius and Bacchus have a really, really rich history, both in the Eastern and the Western Church, but even more so in the Eastern Church because they were from Syria, and they are highly esteemed and venerated in the Eastern Church, I think would be the appropriate way to describe it. And yeah, they have for almost 2,000 years now been highly esteemed, and the story of their brotherhood and martyrdom has strengthened Christians throughout the centuries. And I'm not going to tell you why I decided to do this podcast or what inspired me to do it until after I tell you their story.
Okay. Keeping us guessing. All right.
Yeah. So I'm going to use a couple different resources here that I'm going to be paraphrasing from. So I'll just cite them right now, and I'll be I'll be chopping these up between these two sources. But I'm using, let's see, the Britannica entry on Sergius and Bacchus, as well as a entry about them on the Orthodox Church in America site, which is I don't know if it's a Syrian Orthodox. It just says it's an Orthodox Christian church. I'm not sure where their patriarch is, but anyway. So Sergius and Bacchus were men that lived in Syria, and they were both pretty high-ranking officers, as I understand it, in the army of Emperor Maximilian. Maximilian had a Roman emperor rule from 284 to 305 Anno Domini. And these guys, at some point along the way, I'm not sure if this is before they were Roman soldiers, probably after they were Roman soldiers, if just based off what we know about what like Christian formation looked like, it probably is not likely that they would have been Christians and then been enlisted in the Roman army, but also it might not have been their choice. Either way, where we pick up on their story, we've got these two men that served together in the Roman army, and they were known to have an incredibly close bond of friendship, so much so that it is very likely, and some sources tell us, that they had gone through what's called a brother making ceremony called Adelphopoiesis.
Okay.
Adelpho Poiesis, I think is how you pronounce it. And this was we'll talk more about it a little later, but this was
when you watch Die Hard together.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and then you go to, and then you go to your priest and say, we want to watch Die Hard together every day for the rest of our lives.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So it's like a bro marriage.
We'll get there in a minute. From every this is still by the way, this is still a like a ceremony that you can engage in, I think particularly in Eastern Orthodox churches, where it's basically like a church sanctioning and bonding of tight brotherhood between two men or two women.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
they would use the language of like siblinghood.
Yeah.
So this would be like if you and I were working in the same spheres. We were both Christians, and our brotherhood was so strong that the church said, we're just going to basically say that you guys are actually brothers. Almost like you're kind of adopting each other as brothers.
Okay.
So these guys had that level of a friendship, and there was people that didn't like them, and they were supposedly favorites of the Emperor Maximian, but they were kind of almost like in a Daniel the prophet style, told on by maybe some of their peers, people that were envious of them and didn't like them. And I think it was a secret that they were Christians, because this was not a favorable time to be a Christian, especially in the Roman army. And so Maximian ordered them to sacrifice to the god Jupiter as a way of kind of repenting and recanting their Christianity, and they wouldn't do it. Very similar parallels here to certain aspects of Daniel's life. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, high-ranking officers in a pagan nation being told that they have to do something that Jesus would not allow them to do. And so Maximian was super upset with them. And when he told them that they needed to sacrifice to Jupiter, they said that, well, we honor the one God and worship only him. So what he did is he stripped them of their military rank, which the signs of their rank, which would have been their belts, their gold pendants, their rings. And then he had them dressed up in women's clothes. And then they were paraded through a city with iron chains around their necks, and it's kind of like how you would envision, like it's like the scene in Braveheart where at the end, spoiler alert, skip 15 seconds if you haven't seen it, but the protagonist is being led, and people are just jeering and throwing rotten tomatoes at him, and just it's one of those scenes. They're being ridiculed and mocked publicly, dressed up like women, and he summoned them again and tried to get them to return to the Roman gods, but they refused. And says, one of the sources I have says, they demonstrated the folly of worshiping the pagan gods. So the emperor commanded that they be sent to the governor of the eastern part of Syria, Antiochus, which I'm not sure there's anybody in history who's named Antiochus who was a good guy.
Gosh dang, you're right. Yeah.
And Antiochus was a fierce hater of Christians, says this article. So Antiochus had actually received his position from Sergius and Bacchus. So when he sees them, he says, "My fathers and benefactors, have pity on yourselves and also on me. I do not want to condemn my benefactors to cruel tortures." And they say, "For us, life is Christ, and to die is gain." So the enraged Antiochus ordered Bacchus to be mercilessly beaten. And the hagiographies of these guys really kind of highlights the fact that they intentionally killed one of them first, so that the other, because their bond was so close, they didn't just kill them at the same time. They made the other one watch the other's torture, and they and I guess I'll just say now, because I meant to say it earlier. This episode has some slight content warnings on a couple spots. So I mean, if you've got little kids with you, it's about to get a little intense. But so Antiochus ordered for Bacchus to be mercilessly beaten, and the holy martyr surrendered his soul then to the Lord. This was in the city of Rissaf, which is now a city that's in ruins in central Syria. And he was beaten so bad that he died. And so what they then did with Sergius, his brother in Christ, they took these iron sandals and nailed them to his feet and made him walk to another city.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine just having these nails, put into your feet, and then having to go on a long walk. So they drove him to another city, and they beheaded him there with a sword.
Yeah.
So that's how they died. Their death has been commemorated. They have a feast day in October, which is, I think it's October 7th, which is observed in the Eastern Church, and I think was observed in the Western Church until relatively recently. And I'll get into why the Roman Catholic Church, I think, has moved away from that observance in a little bit. But there is a church, I forget where it is, but there's a church of Sergius and Bacchus that you can go visit. There was relatively recently, there was another church in Syria. I think it was a 13th century church that had some beautiful icons of these two men that Islamists recently destroyed that church and those icons. So we lost those recently, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
But
Dude, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
So with I can only imagine that this kind of brotherhood forming bond that they participated in did, like, this might be a silly question, like, but did these dudes not get married, or like were you forbidden to marry if you did this Adelpho poiesis thing? Like, was that like how far of a ritual is this?
Yeah. As far as I can tell, I didn't see anything that indicated that if you were going through this rite that you were taking a vow of celibacy, or anything like that. I also didn't find anything that indicated that they were married,
right?
Which might have to do with the fact that they were in the Roman army,
and they're pretty young, it seems like. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
So the reason why I even found out about these guys, I was on Twitter, and I saw a video from a larger, like very, very, very theologically progressive kind of deconstructionist account it was titled basically like gay saints in the early church or something like that. And it was this guy basically laying out this case for how these guys were probably gay, and that this Adelpho poiesis ceremony was a early church official sanction of like same-sex unions in the same sense that we think about same-sex unions today. And the more I watched, I realized that this content creator was making a case that the early church was actually in favor of and okay and allowed same-sex unions. And I was like, where is this coming from? This seems like very untenable. Like, not only is it pretty disrespectful to these guys and the Eastern Orthodox people in the comments, no matter where you look this up on the internet, they are upset, dude. They're like, how dare you? So I started looking into it. I was like, where is this coming from? And I quickly found that there was a professor who wrote a book called Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe.
Is it this guy Boswell?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot from Boswell.
Yep.
Okay.
John Boswell. So he wrote this book that has been widely discredited by historians on both sides of the aisle. You know, Christian historians, non-Christian historians, scholars. I think greatly regard this work to be like pseudo scholarly work. I don't know if John Boswell was, or I don't know if he's still living, if he was a gay man himself. I don't want to slander him if he wasn't, but
looks like he passed away in 94.
Okay.
Looks like he was part of the Episcopal Church for a while. I don't know if he was. He actually passed away from AIDS complications, so I think he was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this was long after he published his book. I'm just looking it up right now. Yeah, he published it in 1994, so he published this book and then died.
Okay.
So he had done a lot of work using Sergius and Bacchus kind of as the prototype to try to make a case that that not only were they homosexual, but that this early church union was same-sex union. And if you think about it, like in the 90s, this was in America, this was definitely a hot topic at the time. Like, you know, we're now at the time of recording in a spot in America where same-sex marriage is sanctioned by the state, but that was not the case in the 90s. And the conversation at the time was more along the lines of, can we have some sort of like same-sex union that would offer tax benefits to citizens and would allow for some sort of identification?
Well, and even speaking of AIDS, like this was pretty central in the AIDS epidemic that was happening, which was a huge, it was a very polarizing thing, because on the one hand, a lot of practicing homosexuals were dying from this, but then there was a lot of there was a loud voice from kind of that Jerry Falwell side of the church that like AIDS was this plague that God had sent to, you know, to crush the backs of gay people. So this was definitely a very, very, like, we think about how there's been a normalization that's happened quite a bit in our current era, and in the early 90s, it was more tolerant than, you know, like the 60s or 70s, but it was still a very contentious topic.
So he wrote this, and a lot of scholars are immediately like, whoa. And now fast forwarding to today, Sergius and Bacchus have become prominent icons. Literally, icons are being made. Like you might, if you were to go observe a like a gay pride festival or parade, you might see like image of these two guys like kissing or holding each other with a bunch of other kind of gay imagery in like a religious iconographic sense. And so there's in the wings of the, I wouldn't call it the church, but the institutions that are calling themselves churches that are fully embracing these things, they've kind of been kind of lifted up as these big icons, and it's honestly like if you were to even Google like an image search, you would see some pretty blasphemous stuff. So it was being addressed by scholars, but also a lot of Eastern Orthodox people were pretty concerned about this as well. I did read one thing that I think around this time, because of the confusion surrounding this, the Roman Catholic Church, I don't think that they I'm not sure if they took sainthood away from these guys, but there was one action they took. It's the same time when they basically were like, we're not commemorating Sergius and Bacchus and, you ready for this? Wilgefortis.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wilgefortis never existed.
Yeah.
That's the problem with that whole story. Oh man. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things to say about this. The first thing that came to mind for me when you first told me this story was the kind of progressive discourse around David and Jonathan from the Bible. Because that is a conversation, and like I understand the desire for LGBT people who want to experience the goodness of the church and church history and the Holy Scriptures without kind of taking a hard look at their sexual identity. Like I understand it, but I think for me, some of this feels like even beyond the moral side of it, it feels very intellectually dishonest, because it's like, do you think that Jonathan and David could coexist in a like clearly promoted by scripture like sexual relationship, and that would coexist with what the Bible has to say about homosexual relationships? Or even like this, it's like you think that there was an Eastern Orthodox tradition of brotherhood that was just slyly like basically like this backdoor same-sex marriage ritual, but suddenly, like, I don't know, that it's like a conspiracy.
Yeah, it doesn't comport with anything else that we know about the early church and how they did things. When we talk about how the early church catechized people who came to the faith, there is no way that so I'm even willing to conceive of a possibility, although I don't think there's any historical backing for this. I'm willing to conceive of a possibility that that these two men were engaging in let's say they were engaging in a homosexual lifestyle together, and then they became Christians. That would have ceased. Yeah. And they would have, if they were going to remain in communion with the church, that would have had to have ceased. Mm-hmm. So I've got two angles I want to talk about here. I want to talk about kind of like the scholarly issues, and I want to talk about like the kind of the philosophical side of things.
Let's do it.
Which one did you want to?
Let's start with philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's one of the things that Boswell drew on, and I did some digging to try to figure out where he found this, and I honestly could not find any backing for it in any of the hagiographies, but apparently somewhere he found some sort of text that used the term erasti to refer to them, which erasti during this Roman period was usually a relationship between like an older, more powerful man and a younger man, sometimes maybe even like a younger, more effeminate man, and they would have some form of sexual contact with each other. To what degree, I'm not sure, but it was like this. I mean, the Romans had a lot of kind of like power dynamics that they exercised through sex. Yeah. And they didn't necessarily view homosexual contact as like the way we do today. Like it was just kind of like part of life. Like if you were more powerful than someone, then they were potentially a sexual object for you. And so I think Boswell found something that referred to these guys in this way. And my thought on that is, even if someone wrote that would be a even earlier misunderstanding of the type of close bond that two men can have. One of the things that is so misinterpreted in David's words concerning Jonathan, but is also, I think, like a super amazing thing, is when David says something to the tune of that the love that he shared with Jonathan was better than the love of a woman. Mm-hmm. And that gets taken to extreme heights to say that they had some sort of sexual relationship with each other. But this just betrays, I think, a deep cultural misunderstanding of why God, or the potential that God has built into friendship. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed this with people that I have known who have struggled with homosexuality. I've noticed this in a lot of the literature that gets written surrounding homosexuality. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of love. Mm. And I think this is one of those moments where it's important to call it like we see it. And again, our content warning on this. As Christians, one of the things that we have to be able to say is that it is supremely unloving to sodomize another person. Like that's not what God calls love. That would not be like the apex or the overflowing of a loving relationship. That would be the overflowing of selfishness and slavery to self ultimately. And so when our culture sees strong male friendship, it becomes difficult to divide the strength of that friendship with the potential for sexuality. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have an opportunity to hold out a different ideal, which is that God has given you friends who are of the same sex as you for a very important purpose. Mm-hmm. And God has given you, and I would pray that this would be a message of hope for someone who does struggle with homosexuality, that there would be a bright future ahead where you could have a meaningful relationship with someone of the same sex that didn't have to include sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I think of that passage where David says that he loves Jonathan, like it's greater than the love of a woman, that to me is also kind of like, well, David was a philanderer. Like the dude, he had a bunch of wives, mm-hmm. and he, like, I think that's almost an indictment on his own, like, love for the relationship with his wives that he had, because I think that to assume that, and I think that what I'm encouraged by is that this is not offering us like a one and done, or not one and done. It's not offering us a hard either or. Like the Bible clearly does indicate that not only should we have intimate and loving and meaningful relationships with our spouses who would be of the opposite sex, but that we should also have appropriately intimate and loving relationships with our friends, mm-hmm. and with our peers. Yeah. And what I think
that's not gay.
right. And like, it's funny to me because I feel like some of the irony is that some of the people who would be arguing for a healthier view of masculinity are also those who are trying to delete all of the historically intimate brotherhoods that we see in the scriptures and that we see in church history, and because they have to put like a sexual twist on them. And in reality, I'm like, no, like I love the fact that David looked to his good friends Jonathan, like he like cared for Jonathan's family after he passed in honor of his like dearly loved brother. Like that to me doesn't cry sex. But also I think that you made a good point, which is that you could argue, and I think I would agree with this, that in a culture of ours that is as hypersexualized as it is, we have come to equate love with sex, and we have come to assume that something that explores a depth of intimacy almost necessitates sex to really verify the intimacy being there. And I don't know, dude, like if I'm talking to a young guy in the faith who's just like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I have this guy friend and I just love him. I care about him. I want to give my life for him. I care. I want to help him with everything that he struggles with. I'm like, great. Like, that's perfectly fine. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing.
The sad thing, and this is where like we have an enormous opportunity to answer with the gospel, is in our culture, a lot of what leads to, in particular, I see this with young men, but I think that's just where I have like more experience, like in counseling and things like that. But oftentimes what leads to living an active homosexual lifestyle is if someone grew up without any sort of meaningful contact with someone of the same sex. Most importantly, probably their father. If they didn't have a dad that was around, or if their dad was abusive to them, never showed love to them, and then the only people that they've ever encountered who were interested in them, kind to them, supportive of them, were also people who wanted to have sex with them. And that creates a really difficult cycle of pain. And I think the hope of the gospel, and this is why Christianity was so powerful in the Roman Empire, which is, very similar, where it's like, your existence as a lesser person in society was oftentimes for the sexual gratification of someone who is more powerful than you. The reordered household in Christian households were ordered in such a way that if someone was more powerful than you, that it was their job to serve and love you, not to take advantage of you sexually or otherwise. Yeah. And that's what we hold out as a hope today, that you can have restoration in your relationships with men and women that are rightly ordered to bring about life and peace and prosperity.
Yeah. Tommy, if there was someone listening today who you felt who was kind of feeling like, oh, I've actually never really thought about this. I come from a Christian background where it's openly affirming. I've never even thought twice about it not being so. What resources, people to listen to? How would you encourage them to kind of follow up on this thought pattern?
Yeah, the two big ones, as far as like modern resources, would be the memoirs of Rosaria Butterfield and Jackie Hill Perry. Yeah. Those are both really good. A third would be The Death of Porn by Ray Ortlund. That you might wonder, like, why did you just bring up pornography? Ray spends a lot of time in that book from a very fatherly, loving perspective, showing kind of the disorientation of our culture when it comes to these matters, and helps to kind of paint a vision for what biblical sexuality could look like, and what restored relationships with other people could look like. Yeah. If you're in a setting where you're like, wow, I didn't even realize that this, like you said, like, I mean, I'm in a church setting where this is fully affirmed, I would strongly encourage you to do, probably you're not going to have to go back more than about 30 years in your own denomination's history to see where these changes have been made, and compare that with the Christian tradition. Yeah. The teaching of Scripture, but then also, like, keep studying church history, and look at how what the church's position on sexuality has always been, because this is a very modern innovation to kind of try to rewrite history and the Scriptures, which kind of leads into the scholarly side of this as well. But did that answer your question?
No, that was great. I think I would agree with you 100%. And I just want to throw out, like, I have a big soft spot in my heart for, like, the deconstruction movement in a way, because as much as I think it can be very prone to some pretty dangerous pitfalls, I love the innovation is a weird word, but I love the willingness to say, we're willing to challenge the things that we've been told, because there are, and as we've talked about, there are things that have come up throughout church history where there's these kind of ugly overlaps of cultural, moral values that kind of bleed into the representation of Christianity. And I think a lot of people who find themselves in very openly affirming traditions now, or who find themselves leaning into that, are often kind of swinging from one side of the pendulum to the other, because maybe their upbringing had no room for a teaching of what it meant to have an intimate, loving, but also platonic relationship with someone.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were so indoctrinated with this kind of heavily moralistic purity culture talk where porn is something you struggle with, but you struggle with it quietly. Or, if you were to commit some certain sin, especially a sexual sin, then there's like an irredeemability beyond it. So, I mean, I want to say, like, if you're in that camp, like, there is a lot of value to be able to explore and try to shake off the dust of some of the ways that, again, our culture has bled into the true and perfect faith. But at the same time, I think that you're right. The metric that we use is not the culture, because that's going to get us just into a different set of cultural sins. The metric that we want to use is the scriptures, and is in many ways church history, because I think for me, one of the easiest like proof texts for how the Bible comes to sexuality is not even as much the scriptures as much as just seeing that this is not something the church has even debated for most of its history. And so, yeah, I think keep asking questions if it's burning in your spirit, but just be very diligent as to where you seek the answers.
Yeah, and you touched on this, and I think I would drive it home, which is, I think that one thing that I love about the Reformed tradition that you and I both operate in is the emphasis on the sufficiency and authority of Scripture.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling, oftentimes if you are deconstructing, that might be like the focus of your deconstruction, is trying to figure that out. Like, is the Bible true? Like, and I would just encourage you to get as many resources as you can on just the historical. And there's a very strong historical case for the Bible. And the more you study church history, the more you're going to find that where the notable errors are where we strayed from the scriptures.
Yeah.
And either let tradition rule over the scriptures, or culture.
Yeah.
And we are in a setting here. If you're in the West, I don't think we struggle with the tradition quite like maybe parts of Europe would, or if you're deconstructing and you're in the Roman Catholic Church. But if you're Protestant, you grew up in I want to be careful. If you grew up in a setting where you felt like the Bible was used in a unbiblical way, don't throw the Bible in the trash. That's not the Bible's fault.
Right.
And I think that if you can get to a point where you at least trust the scriptures, then you can rebuild from there. Like that's the life vest that you've been looking for.
Right. And honestly, like, there is more than enough room at the table of God for those who struggle and wrestle with things. I've had Christians that I've loved and looked up to for a long time tell me with almost shame that there's like a part of the scriptures that they really struggle with and that they really wrestle with. And there's even times when they're like, I'm not sure if I believe this about God. And that's a tough place to be, but it's also a very honest place to be. So the last thing I would want for anyone listening or even who was in my church on Sunday, to say, because I wrestle with this, it's clear that God does not want me. I would say, dude, like, the gates of mercy are so infinitely and unimaginably wide. If you're willing to wrestle with God, like, you know, Jacob, who literally wrestled with God, then he'll have you, and he wants you. So,
the church is Israel, which means to wrestle with God. That's
exactly
what the name means.
Yeah, and honestly, if you never find yourself wrestling with God, then, you know, I wouldn't say it's a problem, because maybe you're just a really good Christian. But to wrestle with God is not outside of the identity of who God's people have ever been.
Yeah, God tests our faith to strengthen our faith. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 9, where there's a man whose son has a extremely violent demonic possession. This demon is trying to kill this boy. He tortures him all the time. This man says to Jesus, he says, "Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, becomes rigid. I spoke to your disciples, they should cast it out, but they could not." So I'm thinking about the deconstructing person right now who's like, God, the people that you sent to help me made it worse. And Jesus approaches this boy that has this spirit, and it says that when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening?" The father says, "From childhood. Often he has thrown him into the fire and in the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus says to this guy, he says, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." And this is the incredible passage right here. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And that is one of my favorite prayers and cries for help in the whole Bible. Is this guy who's just like, I'm there but I'm not, like, I need you to strengthen my faith. And we confess that faith is a gift, and if faith is a gift, then God can strengthen our faith if we ask.
And and if last thought, if you're like our demographics, probably
I still have to bury John Boswell's work here.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, we're still cooking.
We didn't even hit the scholarly part.
All right, well, let's get back to it, man. We're rolling today. Okay.
Did you want to say that last thought on where we were at?
I'll save the last thought for the last thought,
So I wanted to read to you this entry this lady wrote in 1994 in First Things after this book came out. She read it, and her name is Robin Darling Young. Listen to this. She says, 9 years ago, I was joined in devout sisterhood to another woman, apparently in just such a ceremony as Boswell claims to elucidate in his book. The ceremony took place during a journey to some of the Syrian Christian communities of Turkey and the Middle East, and the other member of this same-sex union was my colleague. And when you hear same-sex union, she's maybe being a little bit facetious there. Was my colleague, Professor Susan Ashbrook Harvey of Brown University. During the course of our travels, we paid a visit to St. Mark's Monastery in Jerusalem, the residence of the Syrian Orthodox Archbishop. There, our host, Archbishop Dionysius Benham Jajawe, remarked that since we had survived the rigors of Syria and eastern Turkey in amicable good humor, we two women must be good friends indeed. Would we like to be joined as sisters the next morning after the bishop's Sunday liturgy in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Intrigued, we agreed, and on a Sunday in late June of 1985, we followed the bishop and a monk through the Old City to a side chapel in the Holy Sepulchre, where, according to the Syrian Orthodox, lies the actual tomb of Jesus. After the liturgy, the bishop had us join our right hands together, and he wrapped them in a portion of his garment. He pronounced a series of prayers over us, told us that we were united as sisters, and admonished us not to quarrel. Ours was a sisterhood stronger than blood, confirmed in the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, he said, and since it was a spiritual union, it would last beyond the grave. She goes on later in the article. She says, for Christians, antiquity means the founding centuries of the church when apostolic teaching was preserved and elaborated and a body of thought assembled. Thus, someone attempting to demonstrate, say, that believers' baptism is the only authentic Christian practice, or that women may now be ordained as priests, will seek to gain the sanction of antiquity for his position. So she's saying, like, everybody wants to work with the early church and try to, make a case for their thing. Traditionalists, for whom it is imperative that Roman Catholic priests be unmarried and celibate, prove, by invoking the evidence against itself, that early Christian priests who were married never in fact made love to their wives or sired children after their ordinations. Boswell construes adelphos, brother, to mean homosexual lover. By this means supporting the existence of homosexual marriage in antiquity. Further, in a discussion of marriage in the early Christian period, Boswell asserts that 1,000 years after its inception, Christianity would begin to emphasize the biological family as the central unit of Christian society. Here he has perhaps been misled by the current scholarly interest in asceticism. Had he read the homilies of John Chrysostom or Augustine, the orations of Gregory Nazianzen, or the life of Macrina by Gregory of Nyssa, all from the early centuries of the Fathers, he would have found a considerable emphasis on what we nowadays call the nuclear family as the primary way of life for Christians, despite the attractions of an undistractedly religious life. This article, if you just look up her name, Robin Darling Young, in First Things, writing about this topic, she goes on to in a very scholarly manner, just like dismantle a lot of the work that he did. I found another article written by, listen to this, the Very Reverend Dr. Edward Pahanich, the presiding priest within the American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese of North America, Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople.
Okay, we get it.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah,
all right,
you're a big deal.
Several weeks ago, I was preparing my Sunday bulletin and was searching on the internet for an icon of the saints commemorated on that day, October 20th, the holy martyrs Sergius and Bacchus of Syria. I was shocked to discover that some elements in our society have proclaimed them patron saints of same-sex marriage, and that icons of these holy martyrs have been distributed at gay pride events. Something I was told at Camp Nazareth last summer made sense. During one of the clergy discussions with the teenagers, a young woman shared that someone in her family had an icon of two gay saints. I had no idea what she was talking about and could not believe such a thing was true until my internet search led me to find a 1994 icon of the holy martyrs Sergius and Bacchus first displayed at the Chicago Gay Pride Parade. He then goes on to just kind of re-articulate the value of their story and the brotherhood that's there. But I just read those two quotations just to highlight kind of on two different sides.
Sure.
People being like, yeah, no, that's not what happened. But.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I almost want to speak to, I think, our knee-jerk reaction of that feeling of like, these are people who are not on our side using this thing kind of against us. And honestly, it just makes me think of, in so many ways, how humanism itself is just kind of this, this angsty teenage child of Christianity and the Christian worldview, that before Christianity had such a widespread view across the West and obviously parts of the East, that people didn't consider it a valuable thing to just be a human. They didn't consider any sacredness to to just being a human being. And in many ways, it's like people are using Christian things against Christians. But I also think that there's an interesting amount of common grace in that. And I mean, hey, my hope is that if you've got people who are Googling images of saints, yeah, they could use it for destruction, but that might also be one Google click away from something that changes their life. So I think that it can be easy for us to feel this sense of like ownership over like, no, those are our stories that represent our lineage, and we don't want you using that against us. But I also think that if we become too antagonistic about that, then we could ruin what could actually be a really cool thing. Not to say that there's value in what's happening, but there could also be something cool to come out of it as well. I don't know. That's just a thought.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of on the side of like, trying to shift the Overton window back a little
Sure,
bit. Like,
sure,
hey, maybe
yeah.
maybe God doesn't like it if we take honorable saints from history and be like, you know, lying about them.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think a big thing for sure. Yeah.
But I think my stronger critique is always going to be for those who are going to claim Christ and also kind of take that line.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me. It should never surprise us when those who don't love Christ do things that we don't agree with or like.
Yeah.
But yeah. So should we go find some Eastern Orthodox priest to do an Adelpho Poiesis ceremony for you and me?
That'd be kind of fun.
Brother making ceremony?
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. I think I read that you just have to exchange crosses, and then you just can't take those crosses off.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool,
Maybe a tat.
That's not what it is, though. See, what you're doing is you're trying to change this custom to fit our cultural lens.
That's kind of the Reformed way. Let's make
Take
let's
something
make our own
orthodox and
thing.
make it our own.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. Bro tats. What should it be, like a cross? Or I don't want a Cairo. I feel like you're a Cairo guy.
I feel like you are too, bro. What are you talking about? What do you mean you're not a Cairo
Look,
guy?
I like Constantine, but I'm not in there by this sign I will conquer.
It's not just Constantine.
Constantine basically made it up. That's not true. That's not true.
No, anyway, I thought about you and I a few times as I was kind of studying through this and just finding myself thankful for the brotherhood that we share.
Heck yeah.
And just thinking about like that's something that needs preserved and modeled.
I think that every pair of God-loving, God-fearing bro friends should strive to have a relationship so loving that hundreds of years from now, gay people hand out icons of them at parades.
All right, how about this? Take my hand.
Right now?
Yeah, no.
All right.
If you and I ever find ourselves being martyred, we're not going to give up. Even if they're torturing you, I'm not going to give up.
Solid. Yeah, don't do it, man.
All right,
I'm here for that.
Are you going to give up when I'm being tortured?
Oh, no, I won't.
All right, good. All right, there we go. We did it.
All right.
No tats required.
That's tough. All right. Well, hey, that was a good old chat. That felt real wholesome.
Back with a bang.
Back with a bang. And hey, so the host site that's been doing our podcast has this cool feature where probably if you look at it on Spotify, it'll say send us a text message. The bummer behind that is that we can't respond to any of those messages. We've gotten some really cool messages from some of you guys, and we can't respond to them. So if you want, you can always hit us up on Instagram. That's probably your best bet, which is Church History, the number 4 chumps. On Instagram. We check that pretty regularly, even though it's been a while, so we should probably do that soon. And then we have an email address, which I think is chumpfanmail@gmail.com. Keep sending us text messages. We love hearing from you guys, but if you want to hear back, hit us up on IG or on email. But thanks guys. It's good to be back. We'll talk to you real soon.
God bless you.
See ya.